2019 academic year. The first item of business is to approve the June 3rd and June 9th minutes. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Are you moving to both of them?
Yes.
Okay. I have a motion to approve both.
Second.
Second?
Friendly amendment?
Yes.
So on the June 9th meeting, Shonda, we might want to say that a motion was made to approve the MAC changes. Because it says there, the changes are on the table being considered for approval, but there isn't a note of a motion being made for that. So that was motioned and second, and then we had the discussion. If that is good with everybody else.
All right. So it's a friendly amendment to your own motion.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
toss that in there would be nice.
All right. Okay, all in favor of approving both the June 3rd and the June 9th meetings, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you. President Kenton, it's your turn.
My turn.
Yes.
Okay, well, if I may, I would like to have Laura just give us a budget and enrollment update. Is that okay if she uses a little?
That'll be fine.
Thank you.
I'll be brief because we are sort of early in the year, especially to think about expenses. But what we do know at this time is that we ended fiscal year 13 at a negative 0.52% fund balance. And what we do know, starting to know at this point, is what enrollment's going to look like for this year. The latest report is that we're looking to be 11% down. And we're using the 11% down as our number. We're budgeting to that. If we consider that we can hold it about 11% down until the end of the year, our forecasted ending fund balance is a negative 1.5%. What this takes into consideration is that the level of expenditures we experienced this year will be reflective of the savings we needed to recognize in the sustainability plan. So those have been built in. The level of expenditures also include salary increases for SEIU based on their contract for the faculty, based on that contract, as well as for administrative faculty. At this juncture, it's, like I said, early to tell how we're doing expense-wise because we really just got underway with everybody back to school. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have a better idea of two primary categories that are important to us to recognize savings in, as outlined in the sustainability plan, and that is in overloaded adjunct pay lines. In the next couple of weeks, those will start to firm up. We'll be able to see things better. And by the close of this fiscal period, so after the close of October, which is about the first week in November, we'll have a very good idea of where overload and adjunct pay rested for fall term, and that allows us to make a guesstimation of what it's going to do for winter and spring. So that will be really important to see how those numbers come in. We are actively, Dr. Kent and I, continuing to look at other places such as auxiliaries for additional funding. We really don't want to end the year in a negative fund balance. And so we're looking at every option we can look at as a way to potentially come in above zero. And that would be a good thing.
Is the 11% down in student credit hours?
Yes.
Heads or both?
Credit hours.
Thank you.
Heads are down slightly less than credit hours.
Thank
Credit
you.
hours is how we're funded. So when we budget, we use credit hours.
Thank you.
That negative 1% fund balance, as bad as it is not as bad as what was previously being projected for this time, right? End of last year.
No, it's a little better. We finished last year a little better than we thought, which moves into this year. So that's interesting to say the negative one is better, but it is a little, yes.
So just some additional information. This was the headline of the Idaho Statesman yesterday. I'll pass this around, interesting article, but it's the same type of malaise that we have in Oregon, in Idaho. I thought it was I was in Ontario, and that was at the hotel, and I thought I'd bring it back just to show you it's not an Oregon only phenomena. Tomorrow, I will start a series of discussions with the students about raising online tuition by $15 per credit hour is my proposal starting in the winter term. I've had preliminary discussions with Philip, and he, I think, understands. I'm not going to say he's supportive because I don't know that, and there will be a number of students, and then Sandy Henry and I will be representing the administration in those discussions. We have 3 meetings scheduled in October, hope to finalize or come to a consensus, I hope, by the end of the month so that students will know before they pre-register for winter term classes in November, I believe. So I want to talk about the board preparation and what I'm going to call committee alignment with that. And a number of us, Sarah, Laura, Tim, and I, it seems like there's somebody else. Heather, attended an AGB workshop that the chancellor set up.
And
for
AGB is?
AGB is the Association of Governing Boards. It's one of those higher ed associations that I think they reside in North or South Carolina, but they publish Governing Magazine, and they are kind of the higher ed governance experts, and they do a lot of work around the country. Well, anyway, we're getting ready to host a board here. Our first board meeting will probably be in the first quarter of the calendar year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But, so we need to start thinking about how are we going to care and feed a board and, put on what I call a really good show, right? Because these are public meetings. They will have the press there. They will have other people watching. They will be webcast probably. I mean, some of those details are to be determined, but it takes a lot of work. And I've been looking at our shared governance model and kind of scratching my head saying, how's this going to fit with a new board structure? Mostly we are talking about a board that would be of 14 volunteers plus the president. There will be a faculty member, as you know, there will be a staff member, and there will be a student on the board. But, to me, it's like, when I think about a board, we'll probably have a finance and administration committee that will approve investment decisions, bonding, work with us on the budget, establishing the budget, work with us on the audit, things like that. There will probably be some kind of academic, I'm going to call it strategies, that's what OUS called it, / student affairs committee that will take up issues of our program mix and mission and strategic planning and things like that. And as well as anything dealing with student affairs type items, financial aid, etc. And there'll probably be what I'm going to call is an executive committee that will deal with just board governance issues, making sure the bylaws are current and being followed. They have a nominating committee that will nominate officers each year and vote on them, or propose them for a vote. And that would act probably, if we needed a quick decision and the full board wasn't able to get together, they would act in the absence of that full board. So then I think, well, how well does EOU's committee structure align and kind of feed into that process? Because I have to tell you, in the 10 years I've been working with the OUS board, one of the first questions board members ask me, have you discussed this with the campuses? Plural in the sense of OUS. But I would assume this board, EOU's board, would ask a similar question. Have you discussed this with the faculty or with the students or with the appropriate, constituent group on campus? And so I think we need to start thinking about how well it aligns. And I have to tell you, I was a little baffled by this. Don't get me wrong, I want to reassure the faculty senate. I think a faculty senate is absolutely critical. And that's going to be imperative to have. It's kind of the other side of the question I'm more scratching my head about is planning council, the division of responsibilities, et cetera. And I will talk to the Committee on Governance or,
The University Council?
well, don't share.
Committee on Shared Governance.
Yeah, the Committee on Shared Governance, I'll talk to them about. But I'm not saying you have to change. I just think we might want to think about, is there alignment between those two actions? And I've got to tell you that caring for and feeding a board is not a trivial undertaking. When I talk to people at U of O now, they say we're either preparing for a board meeting, having a board meeting, or recovering from a board meeting. And it's a lot of work. And we need to make sure that we're efficient and that things are aligned and that we have a structure that contemplates or that is aligned with whatever structure that board takes. I'm going to switch gears here and talk about presidential search. Whit Kiefer has been retained as the search consultant for this. They're based out of Illinois, I believe. They will be on campus October 23rd and 24th. Heather's working with them, trying to make sure they schedule. The purpose of their first visit is to understand what the university thinks it wants in a president and to meet with varied stakeholders and to ask that question and get that type of feedback. The search committee has been formed. It hasn't been formally announced, but I think it's all there. We appreciate your nominations. We forward those on to the people intact. We have some of the new local board members that'll be there. Dave Nelson will chair the committee or chair the search committee. He's going to be on the new board. He's on the old board. He's a former state senator and so on. It's a group of 16 people that will screen candidates and make a recommendation. Roy Cook, the former provost at Portland State University, will be staff support to that committee for OUS. Melody Rose, the former chancellor, asked him if he would do that for us, and he said he would. Roy and I are very good friends, and we have talked very candidly, and there's concerns on who's hiring the president. Is the new board hiring the president? Is the old board hiring the president? Are we going to get what we want or what you want at this campus? And Roy said to me candidly that and the new board will interview all the finalists. The new board will also interview with Whit Kiefer in advance, and we'll be involved in the on-campus interviews probably the third week of March. And according to Roy, if the new board and the old board don't agree, we have failed. So he views it as it'll be a consensus or, among those two boards.
So is there any clarity on who's hiring that? It sounds like we don't know, so that we're going to try to make a decision together.
Well, no, the formal authority to hire the president in March or April, when most people think this process will conclude, will reside with the State Board of Higher Education. It will. I mean, it's just the chancellor has that authority at that time. However, the chancellor is a person who I hired before I left, and she agrees that, if the two don't agree, we have a problem. And for all intents and purposes, the old board is already kind of letting go. I mean, you heard from David Yaden at Convocation, but they're just trying to caretake the closure of OUS. And so they will defer, I think, mightily to the new board and the preferences of the new board. And Dave Nelson is on the old board. is chairing the committee and will be on the new board. He would have been confirmed in September. We had assumed he had just got confirmed to the State Board of Higher Ed in May. We assumed the same paperwork could be used. They said, no, they needed new paperwork. And when we contacted him to let him know that, he was out of the country. So he'll be confirmed in December. I'm very certain of that. They hope to do airport interviews in Portland in January and hope to have candidates on the campus the third week of March. We'll have a new board meeting probably week, that third week of March, so that they will be here. We have some preparatory work we need to do with them. We have some consultants again from AGB that will come out and work with them. And then we'll have an attorney on board by that time who hopefully will have written their bylaws and articles, kind of an incorporation, organic documents for them to function with. So that will, they'll be approving that. They'll be electing officers. They'll be doing some of the preparatory work, etc. Also consistent with that, and by the way, it's interesting to me that the Board of Higher Education and Eastern Oregon University were both founded in 1929. The Board of Higher Education will sunset in 2015, right? And so all the policies and procedures that we have functioned under for the last, 71 and 14, 85 years, is that right? No, that's not right. 29, 71, 85 years, will roll forward unless our board takes an action to preclude that. And so we are going to be looking at all those policies and procedures, and these things are important because they're on faculty rank and compensation, they're on student records, they're on residency, they're on any number of things, all the Oregon administrative rules, all the board policies and procedures, all the fiscal policies, etc., will roll forward unless we say we don't want them. And some of them, frankly, I know them very well because I've been administering with them for 30 plus years. Some of them are very, very restricted to like a research university or to a health science center or something else. And so there will be some probably that we will want repealed. There will be some that we will probably want to change. And it's something that I wanted to ask you, how best through this governance structure should we deal with that? There are hundreds of them. And we need kind of an efficient process to review, suggest revision or repeal, or leave as is and move forward. And then, I thought the board will also meet on this campus, the new board that is, and the old board, on June 4th and 5th of 2015. And at that time, have them approve any policy changes we may want and have an official handing off of the baton, if you will. And they will take any other type of preparatory actions they need to that will take effect then on July 1 of 2015. So that's, I think, moving nicely, but it'll be some work. And again, I don't know how exactly you want to be engaged in that or what committees or.
Well, I'm sure we will. Any questions for the president on this issue? I had one.
Okay, go ahead.
So we have the Constitution for BOU, and I'm wondering how that is going to interface with the board policies. We've had an OUS board for quite a while, so we have this that outlines shared governance and a number of other issues. I was wondering how that, in your view, will relate with our.
Well, I think, they'll want to look at it. They may want to change parts of it. The new board will hire and fire the president. They will determine how they want to do that, right? Going forward. I don't know if you specify that in this document or not, but, and again, as I said, this structure seems a little much to me, especially this side of the equation. And we may want to change some of it in advance of the board, but again, it's at your pleasure. I'm not gonna foist anything on you. I may have some recommendations, but if you don't like them, so be it. I mean, but we, I think, need to think about it. There's a lot of overhead in our current model, I think, and I think we could streamline it, which would be good in preparation for a board. So the Constitution talks about, I believe, some of the division of labor between the University Council and the Faculty Senate and things like that, we may want to talk about and possibly contemplate a different model.
I'm sure the Senate and the Council will look forward to that discussion.
Okay. Just a couple other things. Homecoming, I don't know how many of you had a chance to participate. I thought it was great energy, great events, lots of excited alumni. I met a lot of interesting people, perfect weather, great golf game, great football game, etc. So I just wanted to thank all the staff and faculty that were involved in that. I think it was very good for EOU, very good for me, actually. I've been having a series of departmental meetings with virtually every department on campus. I think I still have 2 or 3 yet to talk to. And as you know, I've been talking about the impacts of the sustainability plan. I've been talking about the impacts of some of the contract changes in terms of overload, etc. And then talking about this mission review that the current board, the old board, if you will, expects us to go through. And, that I'd like to try to get through that by 12/31 of 14, which is light speed in an academic institution. But I think we need to quickly review our mission, determine if any adjustments are needed, and, get those going if so inclined. I will be asked to report back to the old board in January, March, or June on that project. And they want us to, find a competitive niche, financially sustainable, and again, in service to the state's 40-40-20 goals, economic development, etc. So those conversations have been enlightening. Some departments have been significantly impacted by the sustainability plan. Others not as much, but I feel like we're at a critical juncture with some of the curricular changes we're being forced to make, and it may, feed into that mission review. And then finally, I just wanted to report that we need to begin writing grants more aggressively for the institution. There are many grants, TRIO grants for low-income students, services, camp grants if you're bringing in people from Latino backgrounds. There are opportunities for facilities. Our football field would like to have turf. Our track needs to be resurfaced. Other kinds of projects. We have ADA issues around the campus. There's money out there. There's foundations that are ready, willing, and able to help. I've met with some of them. They opened the door and said, bring us your proposals. We want to help. And so I've met with Nancy Knowles, who teaches a class in grant writing. She has a number of people she's recommending. I also met with a woman who came out of nowhere. She has 2 children that go to school here. She works at North Santiam School. She's running for a House seat on the Republican ticket in Salem. And she's from Pendleton, and she's a grant writer extraordinaire and can help us. And so I'm hoping to get some grants going. I think the Center for Rural Studies, I think the camp and TRIO projects I mentioned, these facility things, and there are probably innumerable other opportunities that we could think about to get philanthropic money. I have good friends on the board of Meyer Memorial Trust. I know Alan Ford very well. I can call him at any time. I know people in Collins, people in OCF, etc. So we have opportunities and we need to get thoughts on paper and knock on these doors. The Adler Foundation down in Baker City, etc. There are many places that will help us if we ask, I believe. So that concludes my report. It's been a fast and furious first 3 months. Happy to answer your questions.
Thank you.
It's just, so we're working on redrafting the mission statement by December, I think is what you said. What's the mechanism for that? I mean, I know you talked about it in a number of talks now, and I'm curious as to what that mechanism is. That something the board's gonna dictate to us? I guess I'm foggy on how in the next few months we are going to come up with that.
Well, it's actually a great question that I was hoping you would give me some guidance on that. Again, I've talked to a lot of faculty. I've got some ideas, very limited input. There will be a lot of divergent ideas on that, I'm sure, just based on the conversations, right? And so I don't know how best to engage the campus. I don't know your processes, your history, your procedures. So we need to quickly figure that out. And, you know, if you want to appoint a group of people or, you know, I don't know how you want to proceed. And frankly, I don't know what, you know, just because we're reviewing it doesn't mean we're going to change it. Okay. I mean, if the consensus is what it says is fine, you know, I have to say, you know, mission statements generally are kind of mom and apple pie type things. You know, and I don't think our current mission statement is bad, but, you know, it is kind of mom and apple pie. Do we want to sharpen it? Do we want to focus it? Do we want to change it? I don't know. And we'll have to figure out how best to proceed with that review. But if we do it, we'll probably want faculty involved, we'll probably want staff involved, probably want students involved, but, and, you know, hopefully can come to consensus on whatever that is quickly so that we can get it done by January. I'd love to give the board an update in January that we looked at it, we don't want to change it, we think it's fine, or we suggest these changes, minor, substantive, I don't know. You know, at your pleasure.
Thanks.
To follow up on that, I think it took us 2 or 3 years to create the last one.
No, I know.
And that was when we still had an assembly where we bounced off the changes in a group setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so to try to get, in my mind, to get it done by December, then the question, then we have, at least as a Senate, been meeting the first Tuesday of the month. And we usually present a document and then vote on it the next one. So really be presenting a document by November 2nd.
Well,
be able-
we could do it, if you were done by early January, by your January meeting, that's probably satisfactory.
So looking
December
at,
maybe.
And in the
Yeah.
shared governance, the Senate is one aspect of approving a mission. When the assembly was in place, then you didn't have two
Yeah.
two
so it has to go
groups.
to both bodies.
And one of the things, I think it's warranted to go forward with it, and it has to be a university committee. What I wonder about is the timing. We decide on a new mission in the absence of a board that will be in place in a couple of months. It seems to me that that board will look critically at any mission that we present to them. And
And maybe change it again.
yeah, and I get what you're saying, and maybe I'm putting a kibosh on that a little bit, but I'm concerned that we change to a new mission, we go through that process, and the board wants to change it again. Maybe it would be better if we did it once.
There are definitely some process issues that we need to address. I think to your point, Peter, what is the mechanism that can be documented and satisfy not only the board, but our creditors in terms of transparency and
'Cause-
participation.
Because John, I mean, I think as much as I don't like the idea of us doing it that quickly, I think it needs to happen. People are speculating. So many decisions are being made on this sort of ambiguous idea of what the university is. And if we don't start making the decisions with some vision in mind of what we are going to become, I mean, so we're stuck. I mean, we don't have that much time with all of the problems we're facing. So I agree, the chances of this university coming up with a mission in 3 months would be the most miraculous thing that's accomplished in 85 years. But we have to do, I don't know, I think time is of the essence when we're speculating. We're making so many decisions based on different ideas of what our mission is.
Well, I
But-
think it'll also help you, once you decide what that is, help you have a better idea of what kind of president you want to lead it to that future.
So you would say different.
Well, I was just going to say that the context that we're in is pretty close to what I would describe as mission fatigue. We had created a mission in 2004. It was approved by the state board in 2008 as an 11th hour decision that, oopsie, we forgot to approve it. Was approved again in 2010-11 relative to our recommendation with Northwest that we needed to document a little more carefully our governance processes around mission and mission differentiation within the system. And then we had it approved again with our core themes along with all of the other universities in October of 2012. So now here we are 2 years later, we're halfway through our accreditation cycle. And I want to go back to where Jay started, which was, it may be that we're simply affirming and tweaking. And whatever it is that we do, by whatever mechanism, I would recommend highly that we start with our core themes, which are much more specific and are supposed to be a direct translation of our mission, and do a backward walk to our mission to see, is there something in our mission that might be more explicit? But confirm the core themes first, because it affects a whole lot of infrastructure that we have created around the gathering, collecting, analysis of data points to measure our mission fulfillment. So the further down into detail you reach, the greater the effect cataclysmically is on our mission. And I would just as soon start at a pretty high level with our 3 core themes and walk back to the mission to see, is this a translation of this mission? If not, how can we strengthen and refine our mission so that they match or align better?
So you think that the likelihood of reaffirming the mission is a decent possibility? From everything I've heard in the last year, it sounded like we were heading in a different direction. So it's interesting to hear you say that, and I'm interested in that. So you think the possibility of reaffirming what we have is not out of the realm of possibility?
It's not out of the realm of possibility, though I'd be the first one to say it's pretty mom and apple pie, as Jay describes, that we could probably articulate a little bit more explicitly along lines that we have explicitly articulated in our core themes, which is simply our operationalizing of the mission. So to make sure that if there's something that's pretty bland and blasé in our mission, but we can strengthen it by something we have articulated in a core theme, then we should do that.
Thanks.
Well, I'm certain the faculty senate will want to participate in that. And I'm equally sure you need to get that started right away if you want to have a hope of getting it done in December. And it seems to me it needs to be a university level committee with representatives from council, senate, and other constituencies.
Just one other mundane matter. The city of LeGrand is writing ordinances relating to the regulation of medical marijuana, and is asking, they want to adopt an ordinance that would prohibit any dispensary of such within 1,000 feet of any educational facility. including Eastern Oregon University. And we discussed this morning in my cabinet meeting and felt that, okay, we didn't see any major objection to that, but since your meeting was the same day, I thought I'd ask you, does anybody object to having such an ordinance? Anybody plan to open a dispensary nearby?
Within 500 yards. Maybe that's how we make money.
That's what I was thinking.
If we could get word agreement on that would help.
Just the closest one.
I'm not hearing any objection.
Okay.
Thank you. The next thing in our agenda is the provost update, and we have liberal studies capstone substitutions listed as subheading of your report.
Right. So let me give the update first, and then we can turn to the liberal studies capstone substitution. Things going on at Provost Council and some of the subcommittees of the HEC. I sit on the outcomes-based funding subcommittee along with Laura Moore and Jeff Dents from IFS. And we've had an interesting last round of meetings where we're circling around a few criteria for outcomes-based funding. And the criteria that we have settled on to date, and recognizing that this is an ongoing deliberative process, are 3 basic criteria. And then I'll want to qualify that. For outcomes-based funding, we would be funded for completions to transfer students, and bachelor's awarded to a slate of identified program areas or high-profile characteristics that would be fundable. Those being bachelor's awarded to STEM areas, engineering, technology, health, underrepresented minorities, first generation, rural, and Pell recipient. And we stand in pretty good stead looking at it through that equity lens for underrepresented minorities, first generation, rural, and Pell recipient.
What do you mean by backward oriented?
What?
Did you say that at the
No.
beginning?
Did I?
Bachelor's.
Bachelor's.
Bachelor's, I'm sorry. Thank you.
That would be different.
Yeah, that would not be the definition of rural, backward oriented. No. Okay, couple of items of interest from that meeting were a discussion that was a fairly robust discussion around the issue of what percentage of funding will be outcomes-based. That's a fair question, given Oregon's history with the BASS model in the late 90s that was not 100% funded, and the RAM model that has never been 100% funded. So the premise in this conversation was the outcomes-based funding model is not going to be 100% outcomes-based, right? And the conversation that ensued had to do with taking a portion of state funding off the top for research and the research universities, and a robust conversation around just the operational overhead at each institution. That if you were going to depart from student credit hours as a mechanism for funding institutions, you still had to have some sort of base funding. So whatever outcomes-based funding was going to be, it was going to be if research is some percentage of X and base funding is some percentage of Y, that outcomes-based funding would be 100% less X less Y. And that would be the pot of money for outcomes-based funding. So that's pretty much where we're at in that conversation. It is by no means done, but the other interesting aspect of the conversation had to do with quality, and I would invite Jeff Dents to talk about that a little bit and leave off saying that IFS and Provost Council are on the same page with regard to quality. And we will both be forwarding to the HEC documents in support of a premise of quality at all of our institutions. Would you like to say anything?
If it's a little chair, I'd be glad to interject this one.
How much time do you want to interject that? Because I can give you more time later. I don't want to interrupt the provost's report here with your.
The one thing we can do this later, the one thing I can say at this point in time is the Provost Council and IFS are both believing that academic quality must serve as the premise for any funding formula. There's a concern about institutions turning into diploma mills and students not having the knowledge and skills necessary to be successful. While I originally tried to get academic quality as a factor into the funding formula, I was told that was not going to fly. So this is the best thing I've been able to do for faculty is this is going to be the foundation for this funding formula. Everybody in the room recognizes that academic quality must undergird any future funding formula for higher education to work.
Thank you, Jeff. And he's going to bring a proposal to us later. Question I had, you listed 3 things in the funding formula, and outcomes-based was the sort of the third leg of that. Is that replacing RAM? How is that working? Is that how it's perceived?
When it's transitioned in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I don't know how many years, do you, Jay? Know how many years they're looking at for this transition in funding? I don't think it's a settled matter.
And I think Jeff's concern is poignant. Is that going to turn the higher education institutions into essentially diploma mills because we're going to be responding to where the bucks are?
Well, the best phrase of the day, from my point of view, was from PSU, who suggested that outcomes-based funding might, if we aren't very careful and very intentional in our discussions, could very well proffer perverse incentives. That's the phrase, perverse incentives. So yes, we're all very mindful of what we're talking about at that table.
Thank you.
Just one other thing, because it's looming ahead and I will need to be responding to a bill that has come forward regarding accelerated learning. There are some concerns and recommendations that need to be made relative to that particular document that I will be talking to John Knutson Martin about in the next couple of days. And as things heat up at Provost Council and beyond, I will certainly keep you informed. But one other piece of information that would be relevant for you to know right now is that part of the strategy at our own Dean's Council is to reconnect with the region through strategic conversations with our community college partners. And here you would want to understand that outcomes-based funding forms a backdrop for those conversations, that as we reconnect with our region and strengthen those partnerships, we're beginning in our own backyard. These are echoes from the first day back and the platform speakers talking about encroachment from other universities into our own backyard and our need to actually find out what the folks in our region need us to be able to do in order to serve the region better. Those conversations are beginning. We started those conversations to the east of us with Treasure Valley in August and have continued the conversation with a teleconference conversation with SWAC over there on the coast. We had in late September a conversation with Blue Mountain Community College, and we have mapped out Donald Wolf and Donald Eastenbrooks moving on further west of us to have face-to-face conversations with leadership at the other community colleges where we either have an EOU center on site or where we have very strong partnerships. And essentially what we're going to ask is, what is it that you need from us? How can we partner with you to deliver the kind of programming that you need in your part of the region? And we're coming up with some very interesting slates of the kinds of needs that they are looking to us to help them serve. And a lot of these needs have to do with healthcare, fire services, business, on top of, any of a number of associate's level degrees that are not AAOT, but are more specialized. They're looking for computer science. They're looking for lab technology. They're looking for those kinds of applied degrees that unless we deliver them, they will find a way to deliver 4-year degrees themselves. So it's in our own best interest for us to partner with them and take very seriously what it is they need us to engage. And we are very quickly moving towards kind of a summit conversation in Baker City between Treasure Valley and Blue Mountain faculties coming together in computer science and chemistry as the first wave of conversations that need to happen to articulate our degrees and to put together what the community colleges and the high schools are very interested in, which is 2+2+2 programs that very carefully mark out the path that students need to take to get a baccalaureate degree. So those are the conversations that are beginning, and we can expect to continue through November with our community college partners throughout the state. This is where we feel we can get an initial purchase on student enrollments, because those are where the students are who aren't necessarily going to pick up their lives and move them to LeGrand. So we need to figure out what do they need there and how can we deliver it in an on-site fashion and through some hybrid appointments with community colleges that create that loyalty and dual enrollment with that community college and our university. So we will keep you posted at Faculty Senate on how those conversations are going, but you can also expect that as faculty are responding to these calls from community colleges, that curriculum will be entering our curriculum process. So just wanted to give you a heads up.
And that meeting in Baker will include our faculty.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Here. Sorry, again, I'm another guy down here. Because I think it's going to tie into our liberal studies discussion when Jeff's issue about quality being the basis for these 3 outcomes-based. Well, what's the discussion about how that's assessed? Have there been a conversation about, and we're talking about, yes, quality needs to be the foundation for that outcomes-based model, but I didn't hear any discussion of how we determine or assess. I mean, how do we ensure that that's the case? Because I think, or at least that's a question.
How do we ensure quality is the case?
Yeah, if we're assessing it through this numeric system.
I don't think that we actually will be using that system as a way of quantifying quality. I think that quality is, we are asked in our achievement compacts to document quality at the institutions. We are asked by our accreditors to document quality of student learning, and we have those programs in place. Each university does. Those get quantified in qualitative ways that are connected to what we ask you as programs to do in the way of assessment.
So it won't be built into that outcome space, because when Jeff was talking, I thought it made it sound as though there was another aspect that was being built into the way that allocation was being determined, that there was some assessment of quality so that we didn't become a diploma mill. But maybe
I think it's more like the Citizen Kane statement of principle from the provost and from the faculty, that the premise is, we will support and serve quality, that has to be premise number one. And then how to ensure that, well, there's checks and balances all over the HEC. You've got your achievement compacts, you've got your accreditation, you've got their approval of your mission and core themes, their understanding of your niche market that you serve in your region, and our accreditors will hold our feet to the fire on providing the detail of, have you fulfilled your mission? You set forth and said you're going to measure these things. How did you do?
Peter, this confused me for a long time. The use of the word outcomes in two completely different ways. One, as we understand it, which was your question, and then this other way that HEC does. So I don't know if it's a difference in paradigm, that is that their idea of outcomes as measurables in terms of degrees granted to X, Y, and Z. That must come from a certain lexicon that belongs in some discipline I'm not familiar with. And then our use of it here in terms of outcomes assessment.
Thanks.
A comment. In K-12 schools, the issues of quality education and quality outcomes has been going around for a while, and all of you have heard about this. And what K-12 has ended up with is only a quantitative measure of quality education, which has been troubling to K-12 educators. And if it's presaging what we're going to see at the university level, we should be concerned about it also.
Yeah, I think everybody's pretty concerned with that, the maw of K-12, No Child Left Behind, and what that has done to that system. That said, it's true that we're using outcomes in two different senses, and I would leave outcomes assessment to the campuses and allow that to be handled locally. I think that we're walking a dangerous walk if we start down the path to the voluntary systems of accountability and a test, a one-off test. We're never going to agree on what that test should be, and the end result will be to compare the institutions against one another on the kind of testing and the kinds of learning outcomes that our accreditors and the whole industry of learning outcomes assessment basically uses to improve. So it's using in a summative fashion something that is really formative and allows us to demonstrate continual improvement. You can't fund based on those sorts of precepts, so I don't think it's going to be an issue.
So Sarah, can you move on to liberal studies capstone substitutions?
Yes, the liberal studies capstone. As you know, the draft plan indicated that we were going to be eliminating the capstone. There were several conversations that happened between the end of April, when the draft plan was published, and when the final plan was published. I recognize that a line in there said that programs would approve the course substitution. And while some programs came forth with, here's the slate of courses that we would approve, it very quickly came to our attention that that was going to be an inadequate way of dealing with a couple of things, not least of which is a sustainability plan and that substitution language in the plan. One of the problems was that it was going to be insufficient to simply substitute any old 400 level class without having a clear understanding of what criteria were we going to follow and how would those criteria be applied in a way that was consistent with each student. And Donald drafted up a set of criteria, and he went into Banner and pulled the names of the students who were the likely candidates who were active and were getting caught up in this decision by the university to substitute a 400 level course for the capstone experience. And that list was pulled. Donald went through all of the transcripts, and he can speak for himself here, but he went through all of the transcripts with an eye to a recommendation, a late recommendation that came from Northwest Commission, that there seemed to be a paucity of 400 level courses in general available to liberal studies students. So that was one of the criteria that Donald was looking at in student transcripts, was to understand the extent to which their transcripts revealed a paucity of 400 level courses by taking the liberal studies degree. And I'll turn it over to Donald, and you can describe what you saw and what the remedies were.
Well, what I saw was two things. Yes, a paucity of 400 level courses, and then any limitations of what might serve as a substitute meant those students simply would not be able to find any courses. So what I did then was create a list of 400 level courses from each discipline with an eye toward, and then set up with Elwin's help a policy that would allow liberal studies students to select 4 credits at the 400 level to substitute for the liberal studies capstone within their minor, if at all possible. But even with that, they wouldn't have been able to find enough courses. So we changed we added to the policy, well, if it's not in one of the 2 minors, then the student has to present a rationale for including a 400 level course outside the minor. And then some programs were very responsive to that. SoChant and business come to mind. Said, yeah, we'll make room for these students in the 400 level courses that we're offering. We found that in the last 5 years, 400 liberal studies students did not complete their degree and only had the capstone left to complete. So we wanted the largest menu of courses to do that. We didn't waive any prerequisites, so we knew if they chose a course in business at the 400 level, they would probably need to have that 300 level too, and that's worked out pretty well for the students taking that route. I didn't include any independent study courses or capstone courses in any programs, because that was a place where many of those students also were unable to complete their degrees. That the expectations for the capstone in a given discipline for the majors, we hadn't taught the liberal studies students with 2 minors the requisite skills to complete those. So we thought, well, in the end, completing a 400 level course in one of the 2 disciplines would in fact hold them to an even higher standard than we had. But it's true, you're not combining 2 minors necessarily, but as we heard during convocation, many programs at the 400 level are already interdisciplinary in nature. So that was the idea. There were, for these 400 students, they were all called by the advisors this summer and presented with this possibility, and we've had 20 so far take advantage of this program in order to complete their degrees. And people wiser than myself said that's about the level you can expect for a policy like this. Actually, they were saying 10%, so we're at 5 there. So by the end of summer 2015, when the policy is no longer in effect, I would expect at the most 30 students will have taken advantage of this, but that's good. They have degrees from Eastern. That's good for one of these outcomes that will be looked at for this institution. In the meantime, the Liberal Studies Faculty Council, which has renamed itself the IS Faculty Council for Integrative Studies or Interdisciplinary Studies. They are completely redesigning a major, and there will be a capstone course specifically for that major. That major is the second largest that we offer. Did I cover everything?
I think so.
And I've heard some concerns about process and this policy.
John, would now be a good, I have questions about it. It's later in the agenda, but it seems like an appropriate time to just,
I expected that you would have those comments now.
so this is just a vocabulary question, and it's irksome to me. It may just be the industry's sake, and good deal. Integrative studies and interdisciplinary studies are really different things, which I've learned by reading about integrative studies. And I really think as an institution, it would behoove us to mark that distinction so that we don't look like we don't know. I mean, interdisciplinary studies is well established. I don't know. I just think we should decide what it is and not say it's both.
Correct.
I just think it's misleading.
That's what they're working on right now.
Beautiful. Okay, because it's like saying, well, you know, it's art or science, it's art or sciencey. They're pretty different.
We were using artsy and sciencey.
Yeah, well, either way. My second question has to do with the recording of the waivers. You said you've done 20. So I got a student who's been your classic case, right? She's around a long time. She must have been contacted over the summer. She's now being graduated with the substitution. But in DegreeWorks, it doesn't show what 400 level course is the course substituted, and I wondered if that's going to be transcripted in some way. It just says capstone substitution, but there's no indication, like it's a 400 course she took 4
When you
years
say
ago.
transcripted, no, it's gonna show up on a transcript just like in the 400 class. The
So-
same way that if you were to do a course substitution for your own program, the course that's being substituted in is not gonna read like the course that's substituted on the transcript. It's gonna read as the course that it is. DegreeWorks, it's gonna know that this class is allowed to substitute for this program.
So they're, whatever 400 they pick, let's say they're gonna take a 400. I'm gonna take history 422. Their transcript won't read capstone substitution, history
The
420.
transcript will not know.
Okay. And then is part of this waiving UWRs as well? Because this student had one UWR waived to push her through, and that concerned me a great deal.
Well, that had come about because the vast majority of 400 level courses were not presented to EPCC for UWR designation, even though in fact they meet the criteria. So we would just be setting up another hurdle for these 400 students. And so it's only happened in a few cases where that UWR had to be, the second upper division UWR course had to be waived.
Even if they haven't fulfilled the second UWR.
They have to have at least one. And then the second one, if the capstone substitute, they were counting many of the liberal studies students, the liberal studies capstone is UWR. So if you substitute a course for it that isn't, then you miss that second upper division. And so we'd be back in the same place with another barrier to graduation.
And the solution in these kinds of cases, and they happen very rarely, is the provost, as the chief academic officer, has the authority to waive an institutional requirement in a case where the institution has created a barrier or an obstacle or misadvised, or, you know, the list is a pretty short list, but it's more extensive than those three. And in conversation with the registrar, the provost determines on a case-by-case basis those cases where the university may have some culpability here.
It's not a good thing, except for the students graduating. But in terms of what we want the degree to stand for, what the IS Faculty Council will come up with will be much better. And they're just, all this wound up on my desk in June. So there wasn't time for other solutions. But I would highly encourage you all to look at your programs and bring forward for your 400 level courses while you're doing revising your curricula to make sure those are UWR courses where it fits. I think a lot of the times it does.
Deanna?
My question is to you, Sarah, in terms of making the waivers is, it seems like faculty should be part of that conversation as well. One of the things that I'm finding particularly troubling about how this policy is being implemented is that if there's only 20 students who are making use of it, the faculty in the area should be involved in the decision about what courses can be waived or not. Because I mean, that in the plan, sustainability plan, it was supposed to be program area was supposed to be able to articulate those. If it's only 20 students, then it's probably only a few students in each discipline area. And the faculty should be the individuals who are also involved in the conversation. The provost can have the final say, obviously. But I think part of the difficulty that may be arising out of this kind of policy is that it's happening without faculty input. And faculty find on degree works that something has been waived, or faculty find that a course that they do not believe should be used has been approved without the input. And I think that's where it's a little problematic, at least in my opinion, how this is being handled.
Dan, can I ask, were you referring to, I'm sorry, I was trying to answer the question down here. When you said faculty should have input, were you referring to an instance such as the UWR substitution waiver?
I'm saying in terms of the capstone course replacements. So if somebody has decided that one of our psychology 400 level classes needs to serve as a capstone replacement, it seems that if it's only 20 students, even if it was 20 students in psychology, the psychology faculty could be part of the conversation as to whether or not those courses are appropriate in that case.
Okay, that's a good question.
And that, yeah.
Well, those 20 students are this fall and some this summer. And it wasn't possible to talk to faculty this summer when the students needed to be aware of the policy, plan for it, and register for courses.
So the push, right, is to get the numbers through now because we're in financial, for accreditation purposes, and because of our financial situation is why we're trying to expedite that graduation rate now, all of a sudden this fall. I mean, the urgency is coming about because of those two factors.
No, the urgency is coming about because the sustainability plan eliminated an unsustainable capstone in liberal studies. That's why we're doing this.
Okay.
So yeah, it is
faculty sense.
related to money problems, but it is not,
So it's related to money because that's what drove.
that practice
what
is
drove that.
unsustainable.
Because what I think most of our concern is as faculty is, the term you just used from PSU, that seems to be like the heart of the issue here with the liberal studies degree. And most of our opinion is that what's driving this is it incentivizes, as you said, all kinds of bad behavior. And it's eroding the quality. If we look at, I was going to distract Ellen. If I look at the list for art classes, for example, they don't make any sense at all. Like most of them you couldn't even take if you haven't taken these other classes, and they have no evidence of how they're going to combine the two minors, right? Like just because you take an advanced painting class, that doesn't, which is on the list, in doing so, it doesn't do anything to demonstrate how it's taking two minors and synthesizing the integration of those two. I mean, in my understanding, the capstone is the heart of the liberal studies degree. It's the thing that synthesizes all of the classes they've taken from these two different disciplines and says, look, here's the connection between the two. Here's the philosophical connection and how the two are integrated. That is the heart, it is the soul of a liberal studies degree. It's not something that can be done on the sly or on the cheap, because it's the most complex part of the educational process for a liberal studies degree. It's the one class that needs to be taught in a very specific way, because if they're just taking a class in one of those two disciplines, an upper division class, I wouldn't even know that this student was fulfilling that requirement if they were in my class. There was no way I would be talking to them about how their business degree would synthesize with an art degree. And it seems everything we're doing, I understand the financial pressures here, but I mean, talking about eroding the integrity of our school and of our degrees, I mean, there's a reason there's 400 people out there, is because that degree is the degree that is the easiest to achieve with as little thoughtful navigation of their college experience. And so they're sitting there at the end because they've pieced these degrees that they can achieve from it, dislocated, right? I think this is super dangerous ground. Not a single one of the classes on this list, would work at all. There's some that could, arguably, 401, there's some that could, but none of the ones on this list would do anything to synthesize their two minors.
Well, Peter, oddly, I couldn't agree with you more.
Oddly.
And I agree. And if the quality of the liberal studies capstone had devolved to the point where there was no integration occurring.
I agree with that.
That it was just a discipline-based capstone light. It was a light version of a disciplinary capstone, and the quality from across the curriculum was very uneven.
For sure.
The solution that will come out of this committee is to do precisely what you're calling for, which is if you're going to have it be interdisciplinary, have it be interdisciplinary. If it's going to be integrative, have it be integrative, but have a coherent set of methodologies and practices that indicate interdisciplinary or integrative, and make a course that helps students attain those kinds of skills and produce that kind of learning in their final product. We don't currently have that.
No, I completely agree.
And so we eliminated a sham,
But
to be
that's
honest.
great, but so are we going back on the sustainability plan then and reintroducing it? Because the sustainability plan removed the capstone, I thought, for monetary reasons. So I can't imagine the IS task force.
Well, it was, it's never as simplistic as there's only one reason for this.
No, sure, that's great.
It was expensive and it was a shoddy product.
But won't it cost, I guess all I'm asking is, won't it cost us more money, right? To be able to create the class you and I are talking about, which we both agree on completely. It seems like we have to introduce new classes to the curriculum in order to do that, and there's going to be FTE implications in order to do so. And I just want to make sure, I'm just curious if that we're on the same page with that.
We are on the same page with that, and you know how that's going to work? It's going to work because we have in that same sustainability plan, we have asked every discipline to streamline their curriculum so that you have room in your load and in your curriculum to shake loose the FTE to mount these kinds of courses for about a third of our students.
Steve?
Another concern about this is that it accelerates something that's been a fear factor for a long time, which is a cannibalization of the base. And just as an example of that, in well over a decade in mathematics, we've had only a couple students who have chosen to do a liberal studies with minoring in math and something else for whatever reason. I know of 2 students just this year who have switched out of a mathematics major and into liberal studies because they're suddenly aware that this is an easier degree and they'll get out more quickly. And so I think this policy accelerates what is already an unfortunate thing there.
Well, I think that that's a bit of a stretch to say that this policy, which was created in June, has accelerated something that I don't get that.
Scott?
I'm sorry.
I'm concerned a little bit with student success. If they are choosing these 400 level courses without us really deciding which 400 level courses are appropriate, they may not be successful, and likely would not be successful in that course without going through that kind of prior training or knowing what they need to do in that course. They take Peter's 400 level art course, they're not going to be ready for that most likely, right? But they're going to take it because for whatever reason, right? They take it and then they go, oh, this is over my head. So
I don't see them making that choice. They're making strategic choices as far as I'm concerned. So I had one student who was doing psychology and Spanish and chose a business 400 level course. It had some business because she wanted to open a daycare center. So that's one of those ideal ones to say, oh, I see what you're doing, and had her explain that. So I've seen more of those when they're choosing outside the minors. If they're within the minor, choose the course from within the minor, I think they're perfectly aware of what the standards will be for that 400 level. And so I haven't seen that, but they're just taking the courses now.
I would just recommend that there's some guidance, right? I mean, like if they were to come talk to me, because I know my public finance person on it, they're not going to do well if they're from outside of my discipline.
Over 95% of these students are online.
Okay.
So what I've heard from the faculty is a concern about a curriculum policy coming out of the provost office that hasn't had the input and the vetting with the faculty that are directing the programs that are within the liberal studies minors. And so that's a concern for the Senate, that you all seem to have laudable reasons for going forward with this, and the financial thing that's sitting out there also. But it's Senate President that you also need in your structure to be consulting with the faculty that are teaching these courses and advising these students on their liberal studies minors and their capstones in the process. And if I understand correctly from the faculty members that I've talked to, that hasn't been happening as much as you wanted. Agreed? I'm looking down at the side of people that brought this to me. Deanna, did I?
Yeah, psychology has courses on that list that we do not wish to be on that list at all.
I have a meeting with psychology Thursday.
So my understanding is what the senators that have brought this to my attention are asking is that they be consulted about these going forward. And it sounds like the direction that you're going, Donald, is a positive direction for the university. And Sarah, I hear you saying that you're agreeing with Peter's sentiments about what's been going on in the capstones. It seems that working together with the affected faculty can get us to the place that we all want to get to.
Well, now that the entire year's schedule is available in Webster, which it was not until August, I would encourage you to look at your 400 level offerings and circle back with Donald.
Registrar's comment?
Oh, I was just gonna speak to Scott's concern. Just keep in mind that students are communicating with their advisors. And just like the advisors should, hopefully you're doing with all other course planning, they're supposed to be advising these students, making sure that they've got the so we should hopefully have situations where students are taking these classes focusing on studying things.
Yeah.
I just want to address Ellen though, but at least with the psychology program, the way it's designed, the 400 level classes are only for our majors. They have 300 level prereqs. We do not get people in our 400 level psychology classes that are not psychology majors. Thus, there are some courses that are de facto prereqs that as a psychology major, you have to have a writing and psychology class, for example, so that when you get to the 400 level, you know how to write in that.
Yeah, I'm
And so-
aware of that.
no,
I'm telling you that
no,
the
I know that.
advisor should be telling students not to take the course they don't approve of.
But 222 is not a explicitly stated prereq for any of our 400 level
Well, then
classes.
you
You see
can't-
what I'm saying?
I understand that.
I understand that's a
You can't-
complication, why faculty need to be involved in the discussions with students.
Well,
who are going to
okay,
replace
but
them.
there is the argument that,
Deanna, let each other finish, please. Don't interrupt.
there is the argument that if 222 should be a prerequisite, then it should be stated as a prerequisite. And if it's not, when it comes to policies like this, I think there's the argument it's really not fair to throw it in. I mean, an unstated prereq, well, why isn't it actually a prereq?
Yeah.
I just think that's the.
Your response?
I know why it isn't. The only people that take the 400 level classes have to have 222 because they're psych majors. Until this policy.
Nicole?
And just about process, so let's say, the student has taken a 400 level early on. Now they could actually take 300 and say, I want to count that 400 I took
No.
forward.
The policy states they would have to take a second 400 level to replace those 4 credits, 400 level of the liberal studies. So in that case, you'd end up with 2 400 level courses.
So you can't ex post facto say that 400 was my capstone.
Correct.
Unless there's a situation where they've already got enough 400s.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
I think
So there are students gotten their minor by just taking 400s because that's what's offered online. Then at that point, they need a capstone, but they can just take a 300 and say that 400 will be my capstone.
So, and that seems to countervene the issue of what the capstone is supposed to be, what Peter talked about. And
Well,
Sarah,
we need
what
to
you
accept
agreed
that.
with what he was saying about is the capstone is supposed to be a synthesizer.
Well, as an ideal description of a capstone, yes, and hopefully that's what this council is tasked to create, is that ideal. That ideal was never real or realized in the way the liberal studies capstone had devolved. It deteriorated over time. Those are great and laudable and idealistic descriptions in the catalog, but when it's done one by one by one by one, it ended up being devolving into a disciplinary capstone light is what it amounted to. There was no expectation that those students integrate their minors.
I completely agree with that. I mean, that's been my experience in the last 10 years. It seems like as long as we're dealing with overhauling the capstone, which Rosemary sounds like she's on that committee, which is why I point to her, it seems like we need to do a lot more than that if we're going to fix this degree, which I have that degree for the record. I have a degree in chemistry and geology. I know I teach art, but I have a liberal studies degree. And it has to go back to the advising office, especially the regional advising office. There's so many things that need to happen if we're going to attempt to do what you say. And, you know,
as someone who's on that committee, the consideration of that committee is that as of the end of this year, liberal studies no longer exists. We're forming a new name.
Oh, okay.
And whatever that's going to look like, you all as faculty are invited to participate. And we would love that sort of input. Because that is the exact thing we're trying to figure out right now. Not just the name. Even if you understand the difference. But because we haven't picked a name yet, but informing that is to say the consideration of that group is that liberal studies doesn't exist at the end of this year.
Okay.
And a new faculty driven nature of some form. And not something that just replaces it. So, the discussion about the policy in here, it's a stopgap between now and that June 15th.
Sure.
Time frame. That may be something to keep in mind. We're not talking about a 6 years from now type of thing. We are talking about something that exists this year and then as far as I understand it, no longer exists. So just something like that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't there be a teach out though? I mean, you have to teach out. So then would we be substituting 400 level class until,
No, I think they'd have to take the new, let's call it integrative studies capstone.
well, they'd have to be a teacher. Whoever has
I don't
declared,
necessarily disagree, I'm just throwing this in there as a piece of consider. Once you actually terminate the liberal studies program, okay, if we're revising the program and we're going through the shared governance process and morph it into something else, that's one thing that this still applies. Consider this, once you change a program or you terminate it, you still have to allow students who are in the pipeline for that previous catalog
Correct.
year the ability to finish according to that catalog year's requirements. So the catalog year requirements for this year on liberal studies, those students, this policy won't apply to them. So I'm trying to think through it. Yes, the most comparable thing to it for them after next fall would be this new capstone.
It seems to me that this is very much a work in progress, and that this committee has a lot of work to do to get this information to EPCC in a timely fashion so we can even act on it so that we get something new in the fall of next year. Would that be a correct assessment, folks?
Mhm.
Do we need more discussion now, or can we move on? Recognize Rosemary.
This is just a very quick suggestion to help this integration perhaps this year. One of the things we did in our programs is send out a message to all our minors, asking if they were choosing a liberal studies degree and trying to give them some advice from our end on what might be good for them, and encouraging any of us who are teaching 400 level courses to make some potential assignments, at least when there are choices within the 400 level courses we're offering that could encourage them to integrate the two fields they had used. So it's not, it doesn't solve anything policy-wise, but in terms of the students we have, I think it's helping them to see that they can do an integrated project even though it's in a content area that isn't the capstone itself. So that's just a suggestion for something that might help.
Okay. I'd like to move on. The next agenda on our item is Dr. Romano presenting on his student services program. Javier?
Thank you. Thank you all. I hope to be coming to you periodically as you see a need. One of the things that I'd like to be doing this year is open up the lens and the optics as it relates to admissions and student services, what we do, how we do it, and also, frankly, be responsive to questions that you will have as we go forward through the process. I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of pieces, and I'm prepared to speak to any of them, but I also recognize it's late in the day, so I want to be very sensitive to your time. The first and foremost, and I don't know how many of you have this, is the preview day schedule for the upcoming preview day on October 18th. The reason I want to share it with you, and I'll pass them out, I know you have access to it on your links. So what I want to do is really kind of use this, not to really explore it in minutia item by item, although we can do that, but really to signify a change that is going on in the admissions office. It strikes me that what we need to be doing in order to enhance our recruitment strategies are really talk more about the excellent teaching that is going on here at the university and highlight you, the faculty, and your interactions with students in an ongoing fashion. So you'll see that this preview day does a lot to go into that direction that talks about academic opportunities, financing and education, and also talking about academic destinies and opportunities that students have to explore the range of majors here. We're going to learn a lot from this experience. For me, this is the initial kind of baseline program. We've done a lot of changes from the programs of yesteryear. You will see more programs evolve over time, particularly as they move into Mountaineer Days that are going to be far more faculty-centric relative to the marketing and recruitment of our students. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we can have all the greatest recruiters in the world, but the fact of the matter is students are our best recruiters. And that ultimately turns to you, the faculty, and your interactions with them in regards to how we're doing, what we're doing in our path and process forward. But what this really does do is really signify a change of culture, a change in orientation, not only in our admissions office, but I hope in terms of how we do things and how we resonate with you. I hope to be turning to you periodically to seek your counsel, your direction. I hope to be able to bring students and group of students forward as we have high school visitors coming from Boise, Hermiston, Portland, and talk about your classrooms being available for visitations. We have to be far more than just the buildings and the activities that go on here. At the end of the day, a university is about the academic program. I mean, that's why they're here. And that's about you. And what we do to support you is ultimately what the division is all about. Also passing out is an organizational structure for what is the Division of Student Services. Again, this is available to you online. And what you will see is an organizational structure, frankly, that is beginning to form. We've had 3 months of tweaking and refinements, and I'd love for you to think about student services beginning with admissions, but ultimately culminating with career services as seamless operations. In a perfect world, I would love for people not to know where student services begins and ends and academic support programs begin and end, because most of my career, 20 plus years, has been in the private sector, private higher ed. In a perfect world, I'd love for that to be seamless. And I think we've taken the first step relative to how we're structurally organized, where we're going with that, even in terms of facilities. So we are now intentionally on the first floor of Enloe, next to the Wolfman and academic advising. If you think about this far corridor over here, you've got Molly Burke, who for all practical purposes is our anchor of everything. Colleen Duncasio. Then we move into advisement and Tressa Seidel, Donald Wolf, and then some advisors. And then ultimately, when you go down that back corridor, what you will eventually see this fall is the Career Center, which we're really excited about. And that Career Center search for a director has started. It is chaired by our Associate Dean of Business, Kevin Walker. And they had their first meeting last Thursday. We are in the midst of a director of admissions search. We have, I believe, from what I can gather, a good pool of candidates. The first read of that applicant pool will be the 10th of this month. That search is being chaired by Donald Easton Brooks, and it's being supported administratively by Molly Burke so that I can keep Donald on task and make sure he gets it done. We're feeling very, very good about those two searches. One additional search to tell you about, outdoor program coordinator. We failed in that initial search. And so we've got a search active right now, and I believe the first read on that should be in about 5 to 10 days. I don't know the exact date on that, but we will have somebody in place this fall. Look, at the end of the day, as I've said to my colleagues and our staff, I said we really have to reorient student services to ask the following questions. How are we contributing to student life, and how do you know? How do you know, for me, is going to be measured in terms of recruitment numbers, retention numbers, student satisfaction numbers. In a perfect world, I would love to see that also measured by first-year giving as those students coming out of college. It doesn't matter if they give $5 or $10, but the fact of the matter is students who have a really great experience at their university want to give back and give back immediately. We have to provide those vehicles for that to happen. Jay touched a little bit earlier on our need to go after funding external to the institution. One of my hopes, dreams, priorities is to bring back TRIO funding to our university. I see TRIO funding as the one area that can frankly transform us quite literally overnight relative to student support for an institution of our size. I'm always surprised to see that we've got 3.0 individuals, actually less than 3.0. I think it's 2.75 full-time folks in the Learning Center. I think all of us would agree that really doesn't speak to the totality and the challenges of our students. Our strength is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing insofar that every student of ours has amazing stories to tell. They can be that first-year student who is from Portland, Oregon, and maybe happens to be a basketball player, and yet at the same time, it's as likely that they're going to be, and I was looking at an email today, a mother of 4 who happens to be 53, who is really struggling to make this place work for her. These are our students, and somehow we have to support them in a way that frankly other students would really be challenged with. You know, it's one thing if you're a Lewis and Clark or you're a Linfield or George Fox, when you can laser in your programs and your campus and indeed your teaching on 18 to 22-year-olds. We don't have that luxury. And somehow or another, we have a potpourri of students here whose learning styles and academic frames of reference are fundamentally different. And ultimately, how do we support those students and what are strong retention numbers? Can we ever be at 80%? Well, with the range of students that we have, probably not. So what is the new normal for us? What is an acceptable persistence rate for us relative to who we have and who's enrolling here? 3-4 weeks ago, we had board chair David Yaden here on campus. And as the president knows, I proposed to him and to my colleagues that I would submit to you that we are a one-off in Oregon higher education. Fundamentally different than Southern Oregon, Western Oregon, the Technological Institute, the 3 large institutions, insofar that we're Oregon's only rural university that is dedicated to open access, more or less, that has a range of learners that frankly befuddles most and is responsive to the needs of a region that frankly is in evolution. Somebody said to me not too long ago, a faculty member, and I really appreciated the conversation. He walked in and said, Javier, I understand that you're trying to turn us into a Latino serving college. I got to tell you, I really appreciated the conversation. I said, no, but are we trying to respond to the needs of a changing demographic population? Absolutely, unequivocally. But this demographic shift has been happening on the east side and throughout the Pacific Northwest a very long time. It's not new. It's been going around for ages. It's interesting to have left Oregon 25 years ago to come back and to hear largely the same conversation. It really hasn't changed. And ultimately, how do we find the resources to support a growing population that is becoming not less diverse, but more diverse? And is going to continue to be more diverse. And I would submit to you, far beyond color. It's about academic and intellectual diversity as well. As I said to somebody, I said, well, you're looking for bilingual staff. Indeed, I am. But that could be sign language. They could be speaking in Umatilla language. They could speak Mandarin Chinese. We mirror the world in which we operate in. And many of you have had the opportunities to see that transition globally, as have I. And somehow or another, we've got to prepare our students for the fact that there is no longer an over there. The issues aren't over there. Whatever happens over there in Syria, in Argentina, in Canada will affect our students and indeed our community here. So the challenge for us as a university is how do we prepare our students in this day and age to engage the other when the other is also with us daily. Technology is changing the rules of the game. And so as I said to the search committee the other day, Our Director of Career Services just can't be about resume development, networking, internships. It also has to be about social media presentation. It also has to be about new opportunities in a world that frankly my daughter would tell you I'm a dinosaur in. So I get that. So I'm throwing a lot of information at you. We have a cast of characters in our admissions office that I need to tell you that are good. Many of you have educated some of these individuals. One who we did not educate has joined us from Montana, who followed his heart and love to Montana, but he's from Pendleton, and it's kind of the next best thing. But it's a joy to be able to tell faculty members that when we send our recruiters out on the road to high schools, to community colleges, they're as good as they can get. I mean, our crew can buck up right now against a Linfield, a Whitman, or a Portland State, and I do not make that comment from a myopic perspective. It's a learned perspective, but at the end of the day, we can have the best horses in the barn. If our students aren't excited about what's happening on campus, then the question becomes to what end? So let me pause with that, answer questions that you may have. But I guess maybe the final comment I will make truly is thank you, and thank you for your turnout at Student Convocation. We are going to be trying some things that are very, very different. That was an example of more to come. But I need to say to you, thank you for your attendance and your energy. It's interesting not only when you have new students talking about it because they don't know any different, but it's when you have those returning students and those ambassadors who are saying, you know, different is okay, and there's a new energy to the place, but can we sustain it? And I hope to be able to come back to you throughout the year as you need me, and if you need me every meeting, that's fine, to report on what's happening. But I hope to provide you a lens that is transparent, that shares with you the successes and also the challenges that we're facing, but at the end of the day is a partner with you as we move forward. So let me pause with that and take your questions.
Sure. When the recruiters go out to visit the schools, what kind of materials do they have? What kind of information do they have about the academic programs?
They have what's called our FAIR piece, which is this folio. It folds out. It's a kind of a mass distribution piece, and we just got our new view books as well. I can make sure that all of you around this table get the new view book that we have. I would actually say to you that right now, I would give us only a grade of C, if that, on our publications. I'd like to see us break down and develop a piece that's separate for Cass and Kobe that gets more into the academic programs and what majors are available here. I think they're fine kind of general pieces, but they don't burrow into the academic programs. Frankly, that also would highlight faculty and faculty research and faculty initiatives, which is a piece we badly need. Now, the argument is, well, they can find it online. I actually want them to have a piece in their hands ultimately. So that's going to be one of our production pieces this year.
Steve?
Does that piece of information incorporate some of the jobs and occupations that our students take after graduating?
It will. It will. And in fact, one of the pieces that we're developing on site as we move forward with our Career Center is some kind of, this is what our alums are doing. Before our career director comes on board this fall, we're going to have, in partnership with the alumni office, some kind of a workshop for our rising juniors and seniors in regards to an alumni panel discussion. And these panelists will come from P-Town, they'll come from our own backyard. They will be veterinarians, they will be educators, they will be kind of the potpourri that our alums are. But we really need to start to highlight some of the rather amazing work that our alums do, and we've just not done a good job of that. I'm being told that most of this needs to be on the web. Frankly, I think there's a value for that, but I think we also have to have some old-fashioned brochures on this stuff too. Not everybody has access to the web. And so we need to be cautious with that. Yeah, well, there's that. I don't disagree with that.
Other questions for Javier?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
It's just a quick comment.
Sure.
Many students this year are extremely savvy with social media and producing media for social media who are looking for internship opportunities. So if there are any opportunities in your office that are along those lines, they live in that world.
Well, indeed, Kevin, and we're also looking for a web professional to refine our website. And in fact, our website is starting to undergo some changes and some transitions. I would love the day, I don't know that we'll see it anytime soon, but when students can actually manage the web, there's some really great examples of that out there. Mills College in Oakland would be an example where students actually have complete responsibility for web presence and they keep it up to speed. They get academic credit. They're frankly far better than anybody that we could hire, but you're absolutely right.
The voices, the eouvoice.com is leaning that direction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering about multimedia within the presentation that you're making, both face-to-face presentation and it's not there yet, but on the web, access to the site. Are you planning something like that?
Yeah, we are. We are trying to, I mean, this will sound simplistic, but we're trying to take care of some foundation pieces first. And some of this is not particularly sexy. So for example, we have this new TargetX system. We're not fully implemented in it because we're trying to transition from Banner to TargetX. This will make our lives and our capacity far more significant. The challenge is, however, and I'm going to give you a really great example because it really tells you about the world in which we're living in. We had a situation, and Jeff knows this because I shared this with him a little while ago. We denied a student admission, and the student somehow got an email saying, congratulations, welcome to EOU, here's your email address, here's your logon information, all of that. Well, as you know, that puts us in one hell of a position relative to liability and whatnot. We went to go look for some answers, and rather than answers, people were very quick about And so that's not the issue here. What are we going to do to fix this? There was a solution found, I kid you not, within 20 minutes, okay? Within 20 minutes. We confirmed that the probability of this ever happening again was 96% in our favor, that it was a done deal. And as I shared with my colleagues, I said, that's it. And they were like, well, this has been going on for 3 or 4 years. Well, 3 or 4 years to have this kind of problem is just not acceptable. So we're fixing some baseline pieces, but we've got to ramp up not only our web-based presence, but also be very savvy in terms of what students are putting out there relative to their classes, I want students to be so jazzed about a lecture that they're tweeting about it. Okay, I just learned something that was spectacular. That's going to resonate. They do this, I'm told. My daughter tells me this. Again, we want to start to incorporate some student narrative and some student videos into some of our web presence on YouTube. I'd love to give them, for example, a video 24 hours in the life. This is not new, but it would be relatively new for us. But it's stuff we've got to do.
I was thinking something similar. You're talking about alumni, testimonials.
Yeah.
So they're very similar, I think.
We're in complete agreement. Yeah.
Any other questions for Javier? Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to just very quickly talk about the faculty committee work. And if you look at it in front of you, this document, which Sarah prepared for us, that she and I discussed. I met with each of the committee chairs about the issues on this, and they're in complete agreement about the agenda that we have for the most important things for them to work on, besides all the other stuff that these committees have to do. And this document is best read from bottom to top. So I'm going to start with the Faculty Personnel Committee and talking to Dr. Evans. There's 3 issues that he has agreed that we need to work on besides all the other work that the FPC does. And one is to get an explicit definition of retirement, because in the last, for the emeritus policy, in the last 6 months, we've had conflicts about whether a person who quit at EOU and took a job someplace else was eligible to be emeritus, and we had other people discussing whether they were really retired when it seemed like they were and they weren't. And so what Alan has agreed to do is provide us with an explicit definition within that policy, and I think that will just fit it. The second thing about sabbatical applications is something that FPC regularly does, and that's in place. And the number one item for the Faculty Personnel Committee is student course evaluation instrument. The big issue for that is not the instrument. It's getting the students to make out the instrument. We have an invalid measure of faculty teaching performance if we continue to use an instrument that only has 5 to 20% response rate. And I have tasked the committee and given Alan some ideas about how we can change the structure of how students make that instrument out to improve our response rate. And he is going to be reporting to us in our November meeting about what he's proposing, with an idea of changing the structure and the organization of how that evaluation is filled out to increase the response rate. I know that that's an imperfect instrument. We've had that discussion before. That's the next step, not this step. Okay, going up.
John?
Yes.
My apologies. I have to leave for a 5 o'clock meeting with students. I just simply wanted to say thank you. And you're going to have questions, please text me, email me, call me, whatever suits you, and I will get back to you. So my apologies for leaving, but I just wanted to throw that out to you.
Thank you, Javier. Academic Standards Committee, general policy review and codifying the appeals process. Ellen, I understand that you're already working with Ray Brown on that.
We have a meeting on the 16th, and both of us are doing some work on our own.
EPCC, general policy review, looking at the definition and the distinction between BS and BA degrees. There's some concern about how that manifests itself in course requirements. They're going to be I've asked Donald and Sally to work on that. Streamlining curricula, which is one of your issues, and providing clear check sheets for 4-year plans is going to be a challenge, and we need to get that together. So if we're going to make a promise that students can graduate in 4 years, we need to have a checklist that matches what their intentions are. Then there's a question, and I believe, talking to Sally, that the next two, number 2 and 3, are policies that we already have at EPCC, which is how administrator-initiated program eliminations and how program-initiated sustained eliminations go through EPCC. So there's 2 things. If administration through the sustainability plan initiates a program deletion or focus change, that follows a certain process, and a college-initiated or department-initiated program deletion follows a slightly different plan. Nicole, do I have that right?
You do, I just wondered if this already happened, did we do that? Sarah, did
We have that policy.
We have that policy already.
It was approved
Sarah
last-
had brought this up, and I talked to Sally Milkey about that, and she informed me that we indeed have a policy and that we just need to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, last fall.
And then the DPD credit revision, we're looking at a change from 5 to 4, because that will bring a lot more classes into the DPD basket. Ellen?
That's only one of a few different options. I just want to mention that. I don't want to get into what the other options are, because I'm not sure we articulated what all of them are, but we are discussing the basic issue, but the drop to 4 is not the only.
Right. Good. I'm glad you brought that up. And EPCC will be working on those issues. All of those float up to us. looking at the Senate agenda and the Senate priorities on this is just a reflection of those committees. And that's what I wanted to report to you on that. Any questions? Okay.
Maybe this fits in here because
Go ahead.
Teacher 5. Is your plan to, or is our plan to meet once a month this, is that your plan?
That's my plan, and other meetings as needed. We have a request from the President's office that we meet with the Presidential Search Committee next on Thursday, the 23rd, or Friday, the 24th. The committee has time on campus and can meet with us after 10:30 on Thursday, anytime for the rest of the day, and before noon on Friday. I recommend that we schedule a meeting at 3 o'clock on Thursday, and as many of the senators who can make it will make it. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Okay.
This was the search consultant. This is not-
That's the presidential search firm. Did I misspeak?
You said committee, I think.
Yeah, it's with the committee. It's with the presidential search firm.
Will they bring snacks?
I don't know. Okay, Jeff.
I've come to you in two capacities today. One is as Eastern's senior IFS senator, and my other capacity is I'm the current president of the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate. With the demise of the Oregon University system, IFS recommitted itself to a partnership between all public universities in Oregon. We are no longer the IFS of the Oregon University system. We are the IFS of Oregon Public Universities. Our primary concern is the same as everyone in this room, looking out for the best interests of students. I just want to focus on two issues because I know the hour is late. The first is textbook affordability. In the spring, students came to us and they'd done a OSA, the Oregon Students Association, had done a survey of 20,000 students in Oregon. They found that other than tuition, that textbook affordability was the #1 issue confronting students in Oregon. I've served for about the last 6 months on a textbook affordability work group, and I wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at on that. We have devised a survey which will be administered to students throughout Oregon, including community colleges and private/for-profit colleges. It's about 10 questions long to try to ascertain what they view to see as potential solutions, to try to get an idea on what the average cost of textbooks is for students. After that, the plan is in early November to hold a series of regional gatherings, which would include students from across the entire higher educational spectrum, would include faculty members, financial aid people, bookstore people, with the intent of coming up with some proposed solutions to forward to HEC, which will then be forwarded to the legislature for action. Hopefully there's going to be some legislative teeth behind any textbook affordability efforts. I know many of you do things with regard to use of text to try to keep the costs down, and I would invite you to participate in those forums when they happen. The other issue that is talked about is the outcomes-based funding technical work group. IFS at our meeting in Bend this last weekend passed, basically endorsed the HEC draft statement on academic quality unanimously. I anticipate the same action from the Provost Council in the very near future. I have tasked all IFS members to go out to the individual campuses, to have the faculty senates endorse this particular document. Let me give you a little bit of the history of the document. It was collaboratively written with HEC staff, particularly Brian Fox, who's the administrator for higher ed finance, with Eric Knoll of the Oregon Student Association, and myself, with input from a number of other stakeholders, assessment people, et cetera, throughout the system. As I mentioned previously, the first thing that happened was when I was tasked by IFS membership to participate in this work group. Please know, I'm the only faculty member on the state on this work group. And I came forth with the idea of academic quality needs to be part of the funding formula. I was told in no uncertain terms that the vice presidents of finance would not sign off on that. Then I said, well, we need a strong statement that says that academic quality undergirds everything we do and moreover must be considered in the development of this funding formula. The draft prior to this, which was run through the work group, basically had a list of tentative measures that may have been used in order to evaluate, assess academic quality. Those of us, and Peter raised a good question, how do we actually do that? And I think my take on this point in time is what we basically did at the agreement of the work group was we hacked that part out, and we're basically asking for you to endorse this position statement at this point in time that basically says we stand for academic quality. A couple things to try to explicate on what Sarah said, because I think these are important points. One, I'm unsure at this particular juncture whether the outcome be entirely based on that particular work that we're doing in the categories that Sarah said. Tennessee is one state in which all the funding goes through this type of formula. Other states range in terms of the percentage devoted to the formula, 15 to 40% as a range. So it's unclear at this particular point in time whether we will be immediately going to that particular formula to fund all of higher education. Separate this from what's called base funding. And that may be, so we're maybe looking at outcome-based, and to mention Donald's point, the reason-based funding is because the RAM model was more of a seat time. It wasn't really about outcome. The other issue, which is really up for debate right now, which I've been very insistent, and this is part of me trying to advocate for the best interest of the institution, is that we do not take a cookie-cutter approach to the implementation of this outcome-based formula. We need to ascertain what the weighting is for these factors which Sarah's mentioned. The bigger schools, they wanted to focus inherently on number of degrees attained. As Sarah mentioned, we have another that are more mission specific for us that may be in our best interest. Every opportunity that I have, and I will have it again this week, in front of the full Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and making the argument that we need to differentiate the funding formulas based on the mission of an institution. Not a cookie cutter approach that says, okay, 80%, 15% for all institutions, that we need to locate that funding formula based on the different missions of the institutions, particularly the technical and regional universities. It's an uphill battle. I can tell you what's going to happen right now. One, there will be no implicit acknowledgement of how we measure academic quality at this point in time. That's one thing that the vice presidents of finance are absolutely in agreement with. They don't want to go down that road. I recognize the difficulty of doing that. And for that reason, I urge you, Mr. President, to, my recommendation would be to take a vote in terms of the draft statement at your earliest convenience. It's only going to make Eastern Oregon look good if I'm able to go to the HEC meeting on Thursday saying the Eastern Oregon University Faculty Senate has already endorsed this statement. I realize the statement did not come before you in time to really be thoughtful about it, but I can tell you at this point in time, the Provost Council and all members of IFS are absolutely on board on this thing. We stand for academic quality. That's why we're a part of the academy. And we need to send a clear message, not only to the vice presidents of finance, but the HEC and the legislature. That is what we stand for. Thank you.
And just for a process issue, in general, we have things that come to discussion, we think about it, and we vote at the next meeting. So you're asking us to be out of order in that, but
I would, as a
would-
point of clarification, Mr. President, I think that's a matter of dealing with action items. This is basically an endorsement of a statement of principle, which might be different from an action item.
it might be, and I would be glad to entertain a motion on this if a senator would like to make that.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
For clarification, you're referring to the last 3 paragraphs of that document.
May I see which one you have? Thank you. This is the entirety of the document, asking for an endorsement of the statement.
Further discussion. We have a motion on the floor and a second to endorse the document that Jeff has brought to us. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 2 abstentions? The motion passes.
Thank you.
You're
Is there any questions for me in terms of what's going on? One other point, real quick, if I could, John.
Ready?
You talked about the accelerated learning. One of the legislative concepts, and oftentimes those don't become legislation, that was raised with regard to the accelerated learning was automatic approval of instructors, particularly high school instructors, to teach those college level classes. The Provost Council has already developed a position saying, no, that needs to be in control of the faculty. So there's a number of issues that we're dealing with.
I have a question about the textbook issue. Is there any plans to bring textbook publishers into that conversation?
Yes. Some have displayed a willingness, but I think more, Elwin, what we're looking at is some type of efforts on the part of institutional presses to engage in this. Oregon State University is providing incentives for faculty to write open access textbooks. And I think we're going to try to see if we can engage the publishers. I think that's our real big hurdle that we need to encounter.
I just passed a note to, on the same topic. I actually was lucky enough to negotiate a special edition for CS 161 that only includes the chapters we use in our one term instead of the ones the book has laid out for you. And that special edition is between 40 and 45% less.
Wow.
It's still $64 after the bookstore gets its cut. It's quite a bit less than the original.
If I may, my experience with special editions were that they were generally somewhat more expensive and that they limited students' ability to access, say, used copies online or so.
The thing is, the stuff is the same, it's the same chapters, it's just reduced. So I tell them if they want to look for a used book somewhere else.
Okay.
We're looking at a range of solutions. One of the ones we're saying is for students maybe to give $5 to $10 a term to generate a pool of funds for faculty to generate open access textbooks. That's one of the ideas that's being bandied about.
Real quick, does your survey the students, ask them how they feel about the online textbook option?
Yes, it's a full range. Which one of these do you use? Which one of these do you favor? Even getting down to hearing impaired, ebooks, stuff available on tablets and phones, etc.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we've lost our quorum. We have a couple of issues that I'll bring to your attention. The emeritus names are brought to FPC to us as information items. They're required to share those with us. We have no vote, it's just information for us. University Council has also brought to us 4 different policies that they've approved, again, for information for you to read. We have no vote on that. The FDFC travel funding limit that has been set between me and the chair of FPC is at $1,600. We did that by considering how many people applied last year, how much we have. We still have the $60,000 from the contract that we had in years past. And $1,600 seemed to be an amount that we would be able to fund almost all of the applications for travel to national conferences. You all approved the changes to that, that policy in our last meeting, actually in our June 3rd meeting. Nicole?
Very quickly, the online form, if you could, it's Lori Yates.
Yes, it is.
It's not working. When you fill in the numbers, it's supposed to do some math for you, and it's not doing that, so I thought.
Thank you. I'll point that out to her.
And, I guess, the other thing was I had a colleague who applied for some money this summer and did not receive funds. But I was a little bit concerned that I'm not sure a full committee heard that, and I don't know how that committee works exactly, and maybe it's different in the summer.
And could you send me that information so I can follow up? Thank you. I think the $1,600 is going to be a little high. If we have as many applications as we did last year, we may run out at the end of the year, but nowhere close to as soon as we ran out in years past. I agreed with Lori on that proposal because it sort of bled us down to a number that might be most appropriate for us. We had a choice of going to maybe $1,400 and knowing we could fund everything, all of the people that would apply, and then we would have probably had a little money left over and might have been grinding our teeth that we didn't spend it. So we'll see how 1,600 works out. Code of ethics is maybe a solution for a problem we don't have. I'll bring that up in another meeting. Nicole, your item has already been addressed, I believe. And Steve, we don't have a quorum. We can't do action. Do you want to provide information to us on this?
If you don't mind bearing with me for 10 minutes so I can tell you.
You've got 8 minutes, and then we're going to turn into pumpkins and leave.
For instructional technology this summer, Darren Dudo and I, among others, some around the table here, talked about the idea of getting an idea how our online courses are structured and delivered. I kicked around some ideas and came up with the process of doing a random selection of online courses, protecting or removing, if you will, the names of the courses, the instructors, and simply doing a survey of how those courses are put together. We would focus on not just the organizational presentation and design of the course, but also some pedagogy things and engagement. The idea here is just as a survey, we have to have some type of instrument in which we would do a checkoff or collect data on, and that's the piece that we're still working on. I have a couple of instruments that Vicky Romano provided to me, and Darren and I are looking at it. But right now, that's the big piece. I would recruit faculty or reviewers, if you would, from people who've been in the Summer Institute. And in the document that I provided to you, I put together a draft of what I consider a confidentiality agreement. Those people who would be reviewers could not reveal anybody's name, the courses that they're looking at. They, in doing so, would void the data associated with those classes. We would just completely pull those classes out of the sample, and that person allowed to continue as a reviewer. How do I verify that? You got a hell of a grapevine here, and you know who talks about life. Let's be honest, we know that. The whole idea of the survey is what? To get an idea of how we're doing online classes here at Eastern. It's not to talk about individual faculty, it's not to talk about individual students, it's about talk about the classes and the delivery as a whole.
But not on campus.
It would not be on campus. Darren and I have talked about this. We'd like to do it for fall. So if we can go ahead with this, it would be something we would start the review of later in the term. I don't know how many classes we're talking about, but if it's a random sample of, say, 20% of the classes, Ellen, give me a ballpark figure for online classes. 200 this term?
I'm not even gonna try.
Okay. I'm guessing that we're not talking about more than 40 classes in the sample, and they would just be online. If the results proved useful, not only to this board, but to other people on campus, we might extend it in the winter to online classes. Keeping in mind that the two sort of deliveries are on-campus classes. The two sort of deliveries are very different. So the checklist we use might be different. Ellen?
I just got two questions. One, what would be the method of random sampling there? And two, I mean, you're saying it's just to get an idea for what we're doing at Eastern. I can't help but think that there's got to be some more concrete end out beyond that of how the information is then.
Yep. To the first thing, I talked to Farouk and have him generate a list of the courses and CRNs. Rank order the courses and CRNs, apply numbers to them, and then randomly select 20% of them. Now, you and I both know that sometimes courses are grouped, CRNs are grouped by course areas. I recognize that in business in the last couple of years. So if that's the case, then we just shuffle those CRNs and we assign the rank order.
If the numbers are randomly chosen, it doesn't matter.
I'm just trying to make sure there's going to be some attempt to actually.
Yep. I've never thought about that.
Math that he can make it as good as you're going to get.
So that's one. That's one way. As a co-facilitator for the Institute, the Summer Institute, this is the 4th year. It's time for an evolution. It's time for a more targeted approach to what we do. Now, I still think there's a place for new people who have not been through the Summer Institution to drink from the fire hose and then learn to sip from the technology. Those of you who've been through it know what I'm talking about. The results from this kind of survey, Ellen, would give us an ability to target professional development opportunities. We could say, faculty we need more things on how people can engage in a class. Simple things. Brown bag thing on recording announcements, posting. Simple things, we can do that. 2 minutes. The long-term thing is, in my mind, is professional development. The other offshoot, one thing, Richard, the other offshoot thing, you guys know about the need to develop something for assessing, and I'm going to go there, all right, for assessing online classes.
I was trying to get you to that.
Right? I'm not going to tell you what but that's not my role. But if we come up with a checklist and a tool that's effective during this process, you might want to consider it for FPC and an online evaluation.
The question I have is when you're looking at it and you're thinking, here's something that we can target for faculty development. I would hope that doesn't mean you look at it and say, they're not using any video in this class. We need to make them use video.
No. What I'm saying, Richard, is the question would be how many people actually use video?
Yeah.
And maybe why isn't it? Is it just too difficult to do?
Or it may not have anything to do with the subject material.
Or the university, you might not provide cameras and microphones for your own
I'm
office.
teaching how to identify a rock.
Anyway, I know you don't have a quorum. I was hoping you would, and I was going to ask for a vote. It would help me to know if you have any significant opposition to this. Because if you don't, Darren and I are going to move forward. And if you do, then I need to step back and rethink this.
Sure. I have another piece of information I'd actually like you to add to your survey, but we can talk about it after the meeting.
Okay, so
This is
Deanna.
Sorry, go ahead.
As the data then are to be owned by the Summer Institute?
No.
Are the data going to be owned by the institution?
The
Where are the data going to reside?
Darren and I will be the only two and the reviewers who won't, and the reviewers will only have access to the data for the classes they look like. So if I have 5 people looking at 20 classes, that's 4 classes. That's that's the largest number that any reviewer would have. Darren and I will own it. Darren and I will secure it. I should say, Darren and I will have access to it. We will secure it. Information will be available to the institution. The data without course name, without instructor name, without any way of identifying that class. It'll just be a big matrix. Anybody who wants to look at it should be allowed to do that.
Sean.
So you're gonna be asking for intellectual property, to access intellectual property from every person on this campus. And those who refuse to give you that access to their intellectual property are gonna automatically bias your statistics. So it's something you should think about.
Are you asking, you're not asking permission though, online course?
They better ask permission, it's intellectual property.
But it does the university on it?
No, they own the shell, we own the property of our intellectual property.
So do you ask if we want to be in the sample?
We're gonna have to.
Yes.
think about it.
Okay.
We would, as part of the information, we would say, we would contact you and say, your class has been selected out of a random sample for review.
And then we can say no.
You could, and if you did that, Sean's absolutely right. It would bias their sample. I think what we would do is make note of that denial, not identify the class, not identify the instructor.
Last comment, and this is just me, I don't represent some bigger people I've talked to, but I think there's some concern about the Canvas Review Committee and the distinction between effective online teaching and interfering in pedagogy, and I think people are a little uncertain about that right now. It may not be the best time to pitch this. You may find people saying, God, please just stay out of my shell.
And you know, and I'll be honest with you, Nicole, I was on the review committee. I'm sorry that that's the impression that was that people had. That was not the intent of the review. I really think that it's something like this should have been done a long time ago.
So Stephen, if you want the approval of the Senate, you're gonna have to wait till next month. And it seems to me that this is also a research issue that has a lot of thorny issues, and I think you need to take it to IRB also. And that's the best we can do for you right now. We weren't gonna be able to vote on this issue, I don't think, at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
We will meet next, whoever can, on October 23rd at 3 o'clock in this room to discuss with the presidential search firm our beliefs and attitudes about what they need to do going forward. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Move to adjourn?
We're adjourned.
Do that.
No.
We go
Yeah. Nicole, can I catch you before you leave? I know you have to. I know you run out of here. So send me that. The way the FDFC individual who didn't get the